Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Betsy Williamson of the League of Women Voters, and we're meeting tonight to get a better understanding of the sources of funding for our local governments, the county, city, villages, and towns. And this is a nice gathering. I would wonder if you would like to introduce yourselves. Just no?
Who said that?
Okay. You'll remain
We got 2
anonymous
hours.
then.
No bios, just names and places of residence.
The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation in government. Voter services is our #1 priority, but we also address issues. Tonight's session is the first in a series of 3 meetings dedicated to a study being made this year by the League of Women Voters throughout the United States. The study concerns the privatization of government functions. Our league decided to begin this study by learning where the money for our local services comes from and how it is allocated. We hear much about taxes, but may not know in what forms these taxes come back to us. To aid our inquiry, we are fortunate to have league members Mike Serpy, the county administrator who's been in the position for 6 years, and Mark Miller, county supervisor who has done the job for over 7 years. They will give a short overview and answer some questions that we've already sort of handed to them. But we will take questions from the audience either by the cards or verbally, whatever you prefer. The taping of this session is going to end at 8:30, but if we've got a good discussion going, we can continue till 9, but it just won't be taped, that section.
We're at time and a half.
So,
We're at time and a half
would
after
you like to start
8:30.
on the overview?
Sure. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you all for coming out on what should have been a cold winter evening, but it's like spring almost outside, so our snowplow budget is doing real well. I'm going to address first funding. Well, let me ask this. Do you guys know what we do? Are you familiar with what county government does? How many of you are from natives of Wisconsin? So the rest of you are from like other places? Because there's a big difference. In Wisconsin, we have a model where counties are the service delivery arm for the state. That means we are the ones who provide the services that in other areas like Illinois, state government would provide and pay for and have the employees on the state payroll who do that work. So when it comes to things like courts and family services, social services, and in some places, highway departments are run by the state governments. In Wisconsin, just about every interface that you have with state government comes to you via the county. And that's not true of every place else. So each state has a different system for how they pay for county government. But in Wisconsin, you need to think of funding like an upside down funnel. Well, no, actually a right side up funnel. Up at the top, the big end, that's where all the money comes into the federal government. Then as it moves down, it comes into the state government. And then when you get to the bottom, it's us. And we are the people who, in Wisconsin, since we are the ones who provide the service, we get a great majority of our funding on an annual basis from the state, which is in some cases state generated money, in other cases it's money that's sent to the state from the federal government. To make that clear to you, we have in 2012 a county budget of around $73 million, I think, give or take. I think so. I think that's right. Over 70 million bucks. Of that, $24 million comes from the county tax levy. Okay? The rest of the money comes from only $3 million comes from sales tax revenue approximately. A small amount of money comes from the fees that we charge as county government for some services. Another relatively small portion comes in from grant money, and the rest comes in from state aid. So we are in the business of providing service on behalf of the state. In most cases, the state sends revenue that is not quite sufficient to do what they make you responsible for doing. So we supplant the shortage in whatever it is that we're required to do with property tax levy. If there's any cash left over, then we as counties are able to go out and do some optional things. Things like running an airport, things like a library, things like your park system, quality of life issues like that. But the bulk of what we do is courts, law enforcement, social services, public health, the things that you see in the buildings that you frequent when you come to see the county. I'll briefly touch on the difference between how counties are funded, and then I will keep cities and villages together because those are called incorporated municipalities, and then towns and schools. The incorporated municipalities, that would be cities and villages, by and large receive the bulk of their funding that is self-generated. They are not large recipients of state aid. They do have a couple of pots of money that they get, expenditure restraint money and shared revenue. They draw down some money for things like law enforcement or public safety, but it's a relatively small amount. Most of their money comes from locally generated tax revenue and fees. So that's cities and villages. Correct me if I ever get out of line.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay, I know, and you're bigger than I am, so I give you great deference. Then you have towns, which by and large generate all of their money through their annual meeting process. They have an annual meeting in the fall of the year, and they decide what their budget is going to be for the following year, and they levy a tax. Then you have schools. Those of you who have lived here a long time or have lived here long enough to follow school budgets know that historically 66% of school funding has come from the state, and the rest has come from property taxes. That number is not religiously held to based on whatever legislature or governor you're dealing with. It goes up and down, but the benchmark is a 66-33 split. The only other taxing body that we have to deal with here is the technical college, which also levies a property tax for their operations in the counties that they serve. So that's basically where the money comes from. And that's the difference between the way cities and counties and villages and towns and schools get their revenue. It's not hard to understand. It's hard to deal with from an administrative standpoint, and we'll get into the difficulties that we face as county officials, at least. And I was an alderman in Kenosha for a couple of years back in the 1980s. I know I don't look that old, but that was when it was. And I can touch a little bit on municipal funding problems as well. And I have, my daughters are teachers, so I'm a little familiar with school funding too. And I live in a town. I've got it all, so.
You got it all figured out.
Yeah. I think I'll let it go there, and I'll give it over to Mark. Mark is the chairman of both of the, what will be next year the Human Services Committee group. He's the chairman of both the Social Services Committee and the Community Programs Committee, and he can explain to you what they do and where the draw of their money comes from. Next year, when we have a consolidated, when we consolidate those two departments, that will be the biggest department budget-wise in the county, and it's a big deal. And it's unless you're involved in it personally, it's one that you don't think of much. Most people, when they think about Door County, they think about either the sheriff's department for whatever reason, or snow plows and things of that sort. This is a big part of the county that you don't see or hear a lot of on a frequent basis.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we could touch a little bit on social services. Social services is a little more complicated in their funding sources than community programs. And as Mike said, eventually these two departments, by the end of the year, the start of next year, will be merged in what's called the Human Services Department, which is the way 66 other counties in the state deliver the services now. We're one of 6 that don't. But at the social, pardon me, because I'm going to read some of this because there's no way I can memorize all this. But social services, some of their funding sources, Department of Health Services is one. And later on, if you want to get in specific programs, what these fund, I can do that for you. The Department of Children and Families, Department of Corrections, Department of Administration, Department of Transportation, the Greater Wisconsin Agency on Aging Resources. Then there's grants, fees, donations, and co-pays. And then last is the local property tax levy. And all that is figured into what runs the programs, and it's a mixture of all of that. But as I said, I can get more specific later. At community programs, the main funder there is the Department of Health Services, which is federal and state monies, basic county allocations, program funds, the waiver programs, the KIP and COP funds, which go to support. And like I said, if you got questions on that, we can break it down a little bit. Community programs also does collections through health insurance, medical, and medical assistance and private pay for many of the services they do, and also at the last resort, local tax levy. Some of you, hopefully most of you, got Rhonda Kohlberg from our Public Health Department provided me this little pie chart. So those of you who have one and somebody doesn't near you, you can share it. But that breaks down the public health funding, most of which is county dollars. Sadly, we got notice the last couple days that the state of Wisconsin is 50th of the 50 states in funding public health departments. So I think that's a lot of information. I have some stuff on the courts, I have some other stuff, but let some of the questions flow and we'll see where you guys want to go with that.
We can make your head spit if you want.
Yeah.
Okay? Because when Mark says, when he gets to the end of the funding streams that come in, he says, and then property tax levy kicks in. Actually, property tax levy and social services is part of the base funding because the state makes us put in what's called a base maintenance level for the social services programs. Then we throw in what's called overmatch, which is substantial. That's money that you have decided and the community has decided that they want to see put into social services and community programs, work projects. So there's federal, state money, and then there's property tax money that we must put in, and then there's what is called the overmatch that we put in as well. And that varies. There are 72 counties with 72 levels of overmatch. It is based on what the people over the course of time and history have decided they want their human services programs to look like. So, how you doing so far? Huh?
I've got, oh,
Interrupt anytime.
yes.
What's the difference between social services and community programs? I know you're going to merge. Why was it separate? I mean, there must be two separate identities
There are two different
that
client.
are similar but different.
Right, there are two different client bases. Social services takes care of the elderly
Correct,
and
children.
children and the disabled. And community programs is
No,
the department.
Well, yeah,
And what else?
partially both, but, social services is your economic support unit, your food share, child care subsidies, things like that, then child and protective
Workforce development,
services.
right.
Yeah, and the elderly. Community programs, you're looking at your AODA, your drug and alcohol issues, mental health issues, developmentally disabled.
So
And-
in most counties, because there's a lot of overlap in all of that, that's why we're only one of 6 that doesn't have it, and it's a cultural thing. For a long time, the culture in Door County government liked keeping it separate. And this is the third go-around to bring them together. It happened once before I came. It happened once within the first 2 years I was here. And now, because of things that are changing at the state level with family care and all of that, it has become apparent to the current membership of the county board that this is a good time to do it. It'll let us combine our departments, use our staff in a more productive way and in a more collegial way between the two departments, and it will let us do our back office work in a more efficient way too, because a lot of the back office stuff that we do in each department is the same. So, which is why 66 counties went that way over the course of time, and now we'll be there too. And when family care comes in, most of the easiest thing to say is that most of the people we serve don't really care about the name of the organization that's serving them, all right? It's much like if you have a burglar and you dial 911, the first thing you do is not to look at the color of the uniform of the person who shows up to see whether it's brown or blue, okay? And you don't check the color of the squad car. You want to make sure that whoever shows up will take care of the situation. And when people present themselves to a county, the state has long been an advocate of what is called one-stop shopping, where a client will come in, they'll go to a resource desk, and they'll be pointed in the right direction, and they'll go and get whatever they need. And then the staff can look at that person and triage them and decide what they need to do there as well, which is the concept behind family care and the Aging and Disability Resource Centers. People who reach a certain age or a level of disability will be able to come and be triaged and analyzed and assessed, and they will be able to access the services that are available to them by just coming to one place.
And the other thing about the ADRC concept, the Adult, Disability Resource Center, is that it not only serves the people that qualify for assistance-type programs, but people who don't. So if your mother or grandmother or something needs services, you can go to that agency and they can hook you up and tell you, either you qualify through a screening, or here's a couple private agencies that can take care of it, if you're able to pay yourself.
Well, I think the timing, it's superb. If this is a done deal, it is so logical that there's been duplication, one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, so on. But then regarding the funding then, if you're going to combine the two departments, are you then going to combine the funding in the sense of how you've got your pie?
Right.
I know this is for the Department of Public Health, pie shape, but you've got your pie shape for community social services and your pie for community education. Are those somehow going to be combined somehow?
Actually,
to hopefully be
yeah.
more efficient and
The interesting thing about it is it comes combined. The state, it already comes combined, and the state sends it as one pie, and because we're two separate, we divide it.
You divide it by clients.
Right. So it's already coming, the state sends us the funds, assuming we're a human services department, and we divide it out by client in need and department.
Yeah, there won't be any difference because the money follows the program.
Right.
When you look at the community programs budget, if you wanted to come in and look at the line item budget or the big budget book that we have that's available online, when you see their budget and the social services budget, you will see the programs that they run, the money that they receive from the state, and then the money that we put in at levy, and it's broken out like that, by revenue source. And that will stay the same, but it will be one department.
Thereby then when budgeting time comes, you'll be budgeting for the human services department flat out.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Regardless of how much goes
Right.
this way and that way.
Yeah, and that is going to change dramatically in 2014.
Yeah.
When family care comes in, because family care is a complete redesign of how you take care and how those people are funded, how the clients are funded in that area too. So that whole budget thing is going to change. The money that we put in as far as our levy dollars is concerned will stay flat, but it's going to go to a managed care organization. And so that whole thing will change. But if it did not change, it would look the same. And because the money follows the program, which is why in human services departments, there's usually, there will be a director of the department, and then there will be a deputy. One will be in charge of the overall department, and the other one will be his assistant. But they will all be looking at all of these programs and then lobbying with their big group called WICSA to the state and sometimes to the federal level to try to maintain those funding levels. Because what they don't maintain, we have to try to put in, whether it's human services or courts or transportation, which now can lead us to another issue. One of the questions that's on the list here is budget caps. I hate budget caps. Since when? My goodness gracious, 1994, counties have operated under what are called levy rate limit caps. Then the amount of levy that you had in '94, you couldn't go up more than an X amount of percentage above that level. We're still under that rate cap for a while. In what was it, 2005, 2006 biennial budget, I think it was, the hard levy limit came in, what's called a hard levy limit. In other words, in every biennial budget cycle, the state decided, well, for the next 2 years, we're going to let you raise your property taxes by, and then they sit around, and I've seen these rooms what they sit in. They're very scary places, regardless of your party affiliation, because it was actually Democrats and Republicans alike that have done this to us. And they come up with a number. Well, we think 3% per year for the next 2 years would be the maximum you could have. Right now, the levy limit is, hold on to your chairs, 0 for the next 2 years. Ooh. So here's where the tension comes in. Because, I mean, even if you're frugal, the things that you have to buy to provide the services, I mean, I've never seen them go down. I mean, never. Whether it's the cost of our employees or the cost of or their benefits, health insurances or whatever, the cost of the lights, the cost of the fuel to heat the buildings, the cost of the petroleum that goes into the vehicles, cost of the vehicles themselves, you are asked to do more with essentially dollars that cannot even be adjusted for inflation. That gets to be problematic from time to time. I mean, I don't know many people who can do that with their personal incomes or business incomes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Peter, and I've only lived here 11 years, and I was not from Illinois or Chicago. I sat at one
You have
of
an
these-
accent.
Exactly.
Yes.
From the South.
Yes, I can tell.
I sat at one of these League of Women Voters events where the sheriff was running for re-election. And he openly boasted that he manipulated his budget to the effect that he had a savings of almost $1 million and got re-elected. I'm not sure the exact amount, but it was way up. He got re-elected because he was saving money. So how can he possibly do this year in and year out? And what does he do with that savings? Or what do you guys do with that savings?
Well,
It doesn't come back to the taxpayer.
no, but we don't fritter it away, shall we say. At the end of the year, and actually the closeout is beginning right now. At the end of the year, you square up your budget with your expenditures. For the 6 years that I've been here, we have always finished in the black. The amount of money that we finished in the black has been declining because of the pressures that I've talked about. I don't recall the sheriff's department ever turning $1 million back.
No, but part of too, I think the last time that I can touch on, if you were talking about the last election, we had just started boarding the state prisoners.
Right.
And we had an unexpected income in the sheriff's department that was normally not there, which created an extra amount of surplus, and I'll let you go from there again.
So he was boarding and continues to board state inmates for which we get paid. If he budgets X amount of dollars and during the course of the year, the number of inmates that we house gets bumped up, he makes money. The same thing, we were boarding jail inmates from Kewaunee County. We no longer do that. So he was making money there. And I'm not gonna kid you, there were people who like to make little, shall we say, nest eggs in their budgets. And if you've got a big budget, you can make small pots. It's pretty difficult to make a big pot over and over again. And I gotta tell you, I swept almost all of those pots in the last go-around. And there won't be any more pots. We've got a very healthy bank balance. We're sitting on a very healthy cash reserve. The cash reserve is something I don't like to touch for operating expenditures. I think the cash reserve is there for big expenditures, like if you want to do a building and you don't want to borrow money for it, or an unanticipated, real big cash call. And quite frankly, we live in a time where those things are not exactly out of the question. So we've got a good, healthy cash reserve. There were departments who historically had large amounts of money to turn back in at the end of the year, and that's how you build your cash reserve. But I don't think that I can tell you right now that there's no one doing that, and that the carryover, what we call the carryover to the general fund when we close out the books, is a number that's not going to grow exponentially.
It's just, to me, being an outsider, I thought it strange that if you can't budget for these events, then you obviously need to retrain in budgeting.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about counties, and I don't want to, how do I do this delicately without getting in trouble? In some places, I am always in trouble, so, you know,
Yeah,
it's not
let's
going to
do
be a
it.
big surprise. Right, Cheryl? In some counties, the budget process is, shall we say, a little less than scientific, all right? And there are ways to carry on that type of budgeting year after year after year. From a professional standpoint, you shouldn't do that kind of budgeting. I'd like to budget so every year I can come out in the black. I don't like to go into the red. I'd like to end every year with a surplus. I'd like to end every year with an honest surplus, not one that I created. And, you know, if we finish with, you know, maybe $500,000 to the good on a $75 million budget at the end of the year, and I can throw that back into the unassigned general fund, I consider that to be a good year. If you get much bigger than that, you're not, either you came into a windfall or you're not budgeting right. I mean, that's just plain and simple. You're not doing it right. So, but I can tell you, it's not going to happen here anymore, because we just don't have that luxury. Living with 0% levy caps is not going to let us build little nest eggs or big nest eggs like that. And the rubber's meeting the road, and we need all the money that we can levy for just to do the job. So, if the economy took off in gangbusters and sales tax revenue went up by $1 million, let's say in 2012, we took in $500,000 more, let's say we took $3.5 million in sales tax revenue. Well, I only budgeted for 3, or 2, maybe 2.8, because the economy, when we did the budget development, looked like not as good as it does now. So I could wind up with a $700,000 surplus at the end of the 2012 closeout. Wasn't intentional, but I'll take it. And as I look forward to that, then when we look at how we build our levy for 2013, we can take that into consideration.
Mike?
Thank you.
Sure. And if I didn't answer your question, just slap me, because I'll try to do better.
That technically could be given back to the taxpayers by being applied at the next budget.
Correct, you would raise the tax levy
You could.
less by using the money that you were able to save from the year before.
Except,
Many times it is.
well, yeah, it is. Except it's not, neither is that a good budgeting process.
Right.
Because if you artificially depress your levy by using your savings account, the state's got a funny way of punishing you for that. Because if you can only raise it by X percent, and you take cash out of the bank to reduce your levy, well, 0% of a smaller number is not as good as 0% of a bigger number. Or if we have net new construction, which is what you're allowed to raise it by, 0% or net new construction, let's say your net new construction is 1% that you can raise your levy by. Well, if you reduced it by 1% by taking cash out of the bank, then what you have done is put that 1% on a smaller number the following year. So You don't want to let your unassigned cash reserve get exponentially big, and some nationalities are fond of not spending money. I mean, or, but here, I think we'll use our cash reserves not necessarily to reduce the levy, and quite frankly, I just write the budget. He and his colleagues adopt it. It's not, and Kathy. I don't.
Yeah, don't blame
I
it
don't
all
get,
on me.
well, I'm gonna, she doesn't want me to blame it on her, but I just write it and they get to play with it and adopt it. But I don't think from my standpoint, you want to use your cash to artificially lower your operating budget. If you want to use your cash to defray big capital expenditures, that makes sense. Because to take something that is not guaranteed to be a renewable resource to lower your operating budget is not a good idea. So, Leanne, Leslie was first.
I had a question. When you say the rate cap, is that on the total tax levy, or is that a cap on a mill rate?
It's
And then how
mill
is
rate cap.
reassessment?
Mill rate
So
cap.
reassessments then could potentially affect that?
Sure, yeah. And since our assessed value has been declining, that's been an issue. So, yeah.
New construction would also add to that, because you would, bring the mill up, so.
And then any properties that come off of the tax rolls because they're being used for some nonprofit purpose or
Nonprofit
whatever.
or- right.
those
Yeah.
come off of that.
Right.
But we're at $3.43 per thousand of assessed value right now, and I think we're 40-some cents under our cap. I think our cap's around $3.80 per thousand. That's the max. If we bumped up against that, we'd have to go, I think you could go to referendum to exceed it.
Yeah.
You'd have to do something, and there are about, they've suspended it now for this biennium, because there were about 12 counties that were right there. Here was the cap and here was them. And so they suspended it, because otherwise you wind up with 12 bankrupt counties, and it's not really good public policy, so, not good.
My question, sir, is that you've been hearing a lot lately about generally accepted accounting principles, and apparently the state, in restating their budget or their financial condition, switched from cash to an accrual basis or something like that. Has the county been on a consistent basis for a long time? Is it an accrual system, and does the
Oh, God.
county adhere to generally accepted accounting principles?
I don't know.
In all?
I don't know. I
I'm
sure,
not an accountant.
neither am I.
Neither am
And
I,
but I've got one of the best CFOs in the state who
Yeah.
works up on the third floor right next to me. And I don't know, Leslie, I don't know what the hell we are. But this I can tell you. We really have to have a balanced budget every year. And we do ours on an annual basis. The state does theirs on a biennial basis. We never, local units of government are not allowed to be out of balance. You can't fool around. And we get audited, both internally and externally, every year. And we are in complete balance. In fact, we've got $10 million in the bank, so obviously, we're in better shape than most of the counties in the state of Wisconsin, and on a percentage basis, we're far better than the state of Wisconsin. The thing that drives that gap, and I'm not an accountant by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the thing that everybody wants to get into gap accounting for is so that there's honesty in your budget numbers vis-a-vis essentially your unfunded liabilities. And we have none. We have, there is one very teeny tiny amount of money for a small retiree health benefit, but essentially, Door County has no unfunded pension liabilities, health insurance liabilities, or what are called legacy costs. So I don't know whether we use whatever type of accounting method we use. All I can tell you is that every budget that we pass here is completely balanced, and quite frankly, all of the budgets, at least for the last 6 years, and I think for most of the years before that, have been completely in the black.
Yeah.
So, and they wind up doing kind of funny things.
I'm always impressed because the county does seem to be on a very prudent and conservative financial basis, and I think that's wonderful because we do have a lot of good things. I just marvel that you can do it. And then I wonder if you can tell a little how the highway system works. That's one that.
That's, according to state statutes, the highway system in the state of Wisconsin is called, in the counties, is called an enterprise fund. It runs very much like a business. It runs more or less independent of the rest of our finances. It runs like it's its own highway business for the county of Door.
Kind of like a
Is it
construction
in
company.
$73 million?
Yes, yeah, it's in
Yeah.
this, that's the total budget. They are required to generate revenue off the services that they provide for the towns, the villages, a very small amount for the city and the state. And they receive funding from the state for state highway maintenance. And then we bill, if we plow snow or do road repairs for the towns, or for the villages, or if we were doing it for the city until the last budget when they changed the rules and now we can't anymore. The money that we earn goes into the enterprise fund. And then hopefully, John Kaloji puts a budget for his department. It's like a mini county budget where the cost of his employees and his equipment, all of these things are in line items in his budget, and he generates enough revenue from all sources to cover that. Now, it almost never works that way for various reasons. One of the things that affects the county's highway budget a lot is weather.
Oh, yeah.
If you get a calendar year with average snowfall from January to December, he'll probably break even. Okay, he'll come out right on the money. If it snows too little, you think, oh, that's wonderful. He doesn't have to plow that much snow and spend that much money. Well, yeah, but he's not being able to bill anybody either. He's not getting money from the state, and he's not getting money from the towns or the villages for doing the work.
But the people are there.
Yeah, that's right, and
Right,
that's when
exactly.
that's when he winds up in the hole. So he's got, and which is why you try to balance, and which is why we use 5-year running averages to figure out his budget, okay? Because you can't do it on just an annual basis. You have to take a longer term to look at that. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. If you were here, what was it, 2 or 3 winters ago, when we got 100 inches of snow, well, that blew a $500,000 hole in the snow removal budget. Last year, we did okay. No, I think we, a little bit in the red, but not too much. This year, I think he's shot again because he's got no income coming in, and he's got all these guys. How much can you sharpen plow blades? And, so it's kind of a tough situation, but you live and die with the weather. It's like owning a golf course, which is one thing this county doesn't do. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Or a nursing home.
Yes.
Those are things that are just really dark holes. And you can't, if you get a summer full of sunny weekends, your golf course will do well. If it rains half the weekends, your golf course director is ready to commit suicide. So, and you can't make people go out and golf if it's raining. So, yes, sir.
To what extent can the various municipalities in Door County not use the county or the highway department?
It's completely at their discretion. We have to be, usually, if a town is going to do road work, they will put out a request for quotations. Counties are not allowed to put bids in. We can give the town an estimate of not to exceed X amount of money. If we come in with a good price, we'll get the contract. If we don't, if Northeast Asphalt beats us out, we don't get the contract. So, but they're not, Jacksonport, and who else? Jacksonport chose not to have
They're the only ones.
Door County, the town of Jacksonport chose to have Door County not plow their snow. And, yeah, they've got a private company. And there's the town of Liberty, is it Gibraltar or Liberty Grove?
Liberty Grove has their own highway.
Liberty
department.
Grove has their own highway department, but we do basically the rest of it. And we're very cost competitive.
The only exception to that is I believe there's still that part of that law snuck through where the city we're limited on what we can do for the city because of a dollar amount, and I think that was part of your
Yeah.
question.
We're precluded under this biennial budget from doing anything over $5,000 or something. No,
Right.
you can't do anything for a municipality over 5,000 people, period. It's a population amount.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can't do anything for Sturgeon Bay anymore. And we almost got, well, we did. We have a little problem with the people who are in the private road building business because they would like to put us out of business. And that's kind of problematic in Door County because of where we are and who we are and how we do things. So, but in the 72 counties, there was actually, it's on the books that they can't even swap equipment. So if you've got a grader or a lane striper or something, you
Yeah.
can't borrow each other's equipment. It's pretty
Which
bizarre.
they used
Pretty
to do.
bizarre.
If you owned a lane striper and the other county had a grader and you needed to grade, you borrowed their grader, they borrowed your lane striper. Perfect sense, but no, can't do that now.
But you better mention how we solved some of those problems partially.
Well, it was worse. It's still bad, but when this came out, of the 72 counties, there were about, I would say, 40-something that are just really maintenance counties, where they don't do a lot of paving, where they let the private sector do it, and that's by choice. There were about 20 odd to 30 counties that look like Door County, where we have our own quarries, we've got our own asphalt plant, and we do our own roads, and we historically have done that. And going back in history, when the state highway system was done, it was done as a joint effort between counties and the state, and there was no private road building sector, which is interesting because you got privatization to talk about as the league here. Over the course of time, as in many other things, the private sector saw that there was money to be made, especially with the advent of the interstate highway system. And a lot of, there was no way that, state or county highway departments were going to build the interstate highway system, hence the advent of the big road building industry. And they're still there, but, once the interstate was done, you got all these guys who have got, big trucks and graders and cement mixers and things like that, and they wanted to keep building roads. And they had a lot of money. And so they went to places where decisions are made. That would be like Madison, Wisconsin, or Washington, D.C., or Springfield, Illinois. And they would sit down and have dinner and cigars and things with the people who actually made the decision about what the rules and regulations were going to be. And over the course of about, let's say 30 years, they gained influence at the expense of the people who were traditionally doing it. I don't pass judgment, I'm just telling you a story, okay? This is just a story. I believe you could read about it, though, if you want to. And so now we are in the last phases of having counties, some counties still doing that type of road work, and the people who think that that should be done all by the private sector are sparing no expense in keeping the long knives drawn and making sure that over time, we are like the other counties that just do maintenance work, and somehow the marketplace will get us a better deal because the private sector will be doing it. I haven't seen any proof for that, but, I don't make those decisions. I live at the end of the pipe, okay? And all the other stuff comes down the pipe. So we'll see where they go in the future. The roads will get paved, and we'll try to figure out how we do snow removal, and that when the road pavers go away in the fall and they leave us alone here, and it's very dark here sometimes, and it snows at night, and so things get kind of dicey, which is why in Wisconsin, we chose to have a highway system that was maintained by counties. Counties maintain the entire highway system in the state. The interstate highway system, the state trunk highway system, county trunk highways, and most town roads. That's all done by counties. If you go to other states, like I lived in New York for a while, in New York, every county will have 2 or 3 state highway garages in there where the guys are employed by the state highway department. And those are the guys that go out and plow the snow and do the potholes and all of that stuff. Now, the state of Wisconsin has really got it made under this system because, we sit here and get the snot kicked out of us by the road builders and the operating engineers, But then, you know, in the winter, it's, where are the big orange trucks with the lights and the salt coming out the back end and the plows down and, well, you can't have it both ways. We have to be able to keep these enterprise operations going in order to maintain a level of service that we need here. If there is a private sector model, I haven't seen it. It's going to be done usually by a government entity, as far as snow removal goes. And here we've chosen to do it with the county model. In other states, they do it with the state model. So we'll see.
While you're on the subject of roads, I went out for a drive last Sunday with my wife, and amazingly discovered some roads that were not even shown on the Door County highway map. And for a while, I wondered if I was still in the right country. But here in Door County, you've got little hidden roads leading to private estates, etc., that are not shown on the maps. I wondered if you could
But they
explain
had
why.
street signs.
They what?
They had street signs.
A lot of them are put up by the owners themselves.
Yes,
They're
those are,
private roads, and they just,
Well, they're maintained, they're asphalted, you know. they're-
well, they may be maintained by the owners. And each town is different.
right.
For instance, I live in the town of Jacksonport, and I maintain my own road. And if you look on a map of the town of Jacksonport and look for Hidden Drive, everybody's gonna know where my house is now. You know, or you go on the Door County website and you put my name in under the property thing, it'll show you my address, and then you hit the map section that we've got on the website, you'll come up with an aerial photograph and it'll show you my road. Now, it's gravel, okay? It's not paved. I could pave it if I was, if I made as much as everybody thinks I make, I would probably pave it, but I don't. And so I just put gravel down from Lily Bay Sand and Gravel, and that's it. And it's got a sign, it says Hidden Drive, okay? But it's, and it is on the map.
But wouldn't that be identified as a private road?
No, it would not. It would just say Hidden Drive.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are probably some that don't show up anywhere for whatever reason. But we've got a land information officer and office that works really hard to keep all of that stuff in play. If there's a residence on it, it's got to be someplace. It's got to be in the system because,
Right.
at least for police and fire, they've got to know where the heck it is. So they probably do.
On the reverse side, my parents for a while lived on a private driveway that had been a road that was vacated in 1920, that my grandfather had bought with the road. But if you went on Google Map yet, that was still a regular road. So, you know, it's interesting how that goes.
I actually live on a logging road.
Yeah,
My road was on a piece of land that was logged in probably the early part of the 1910, 1920. And it was just a two-lane rut. And the fellow that owned the 80 acres sold lots, and there's 3 houses on our road. And then it was just graded, but, you know, it's just there.
These were well-maintained highways that were.
I'd like to, could you get, when you're out and about, would you get me the names of those people? Because I want to make sure that we're getting the right amount of revenue from them. Yes. Write those down when you're out there, all right?
Well, I
Call me.
photographed them, so that's.
Excellent.
Just in case.
I'll give you my card at the end. We'll get them.
You might mention that all this information is on the web.
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
It's completely open.
Yeah, if you go to the website, if you go to the Door County website and you know where you were,
You know,
pull it up. And I'd be very curious to see if it wasn't on there.
I didn't have a chance to check.
Yeah, check it out and let me know if it's not on there. I'd be really curious because we don't miss much.
That turned out to be privately owned, but it wasn't a dead-end road. It
Mhm.
followed the coast all the way down Green Bay.
It was
Yep.
a nice day for a drive.
Yeah, it was
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been a lovely winter for a
Only
drive.
that- Not only is that information on the web, but you've got your whole budget on there.
Well,
Yeah.
and also,
You have everything that you'd ever want to know.
And more.
you can go on the Door County website, and this is very helpful to those of us who get these, you know, calls once in a while that my taxes have gone up 5 times in 5 years and this and that. You can go on the website by parcel or by name, find out who owns the property, what the property taxes are on that property, and then actually get a picture of the property. So There's a lot of info out there on our website.
We just thought it amusing that these very expensive houses had fishing shacks in yards from their beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just wondered how those fishing shacks got there because we couldn't find any access to the water.
It's a very mysterious place.
You mentioned the levy that, for part of that, on our property taxes. What about schools?
Schools are, as I said, largely funded by a ratio of 66% state funds and 33% property taxes.
So it's, again, it's the same, that you can't go,
They go to referendum all the time. I mean, if
Right.
anybody's
Yeah,
follows
right.
follows Door County, you know that the school districts up north, Gibraltar's gone to referendum a number of times successfully. Sevastopol successfully. Southern Door, not successfully.
Right.
But, you know, and then you got to live with what you've got. And essentially, we all do.
The
There's,
school taxes are separate, their district, that's not have to do with county government.
no.
Correct.
It just,
I mean, I
it
think
just
that's
appears on the
where-
bill that you get from us.
Right.
Which
correct,
makes
but you-
Jay Zahn probably the
Different
unhappiest guy in Door County for like 2 months.
Isn't
Yeah.
3 months, yeah.
isn't the property values also determining how much the school districts get?
Not, property, yeah, it is property value, it's
Yeah.
equalized value.
Yeah.
That's how the state formula works out.
Right,
So-
so if you have lots of
Where you have
high.
high property value, you get
Yes.
lower state aid,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And but, you know, it's supposed to all come out in the wash,
because
except,
equalized values.
yeah, except there's an, yeah, except there's, yeah, and there's no way Gibraltar's ever gonna come out. I mean, they're just too rich, you know? But we have a saying, when I worked in Kenosha, I was the chief of staff for the county executive, and I was the lobbyist for the county. And so I would go to Madison and work on the county issues with my colleagues. And we had a saying, whenever it came to a state formula, the next one that they think up will be the first that ever worked right, if there was one. There is not a formula in state government that works correctly, or as it was intended. Whether it's school aids or youth aids for us, for juvenile justice services, or highway aids. I mean, they suck you in and they give you a big hug and a kiss, and then 2 years later, you know, it's like some marriages. They just, you know, it just doesn't last. It doesn't look as good as you go down the road. It's just not right, you know? You're all in love at the beginning, and then, you know, 10, 15 years later, it's just hell with it. So, but that's where they wound up. And, you know, when the state took over 2/3 funding for schools, they put the formula in, yada, yada, everything was fine. And then it's not fine, and now it's really screwed up, and it's gonna be a long time to get it back, because you've got people who can't seem to find a way to get the revenue and expenditure thing to balance, which is the price we have. I'm not gonna go there.
Got one right here.
It's not my job.
I just wondered if there's any funding provided for non-senior handicapped adults who require 24-hour care.
Yes.
The
Disabled.
disabled? The disabled?
Yes.
Yes.
Right,
Oh, yes, It's-
federal and state.
yeah. It's a very big expenditure, actually.
Yes, quite a bit, right. That would be run through the Medicaid card, that type of program is out there right now. That's going to be going into the family care.
Family care.
Family care will be taking that over at some point. So that will be going away from the counties.
Family care is a private, correct?
No.
It's a quasi, it's run by the state, funded by a combination of federal, state, and local money,
Correct.
but it's run by managed care organizations, okay?
Which
But-
are a quasi-governmental
Right,
body.
but we have representatives, we'll all have, all the people in our region will all have representatives on it, but it won't be like it is now. But once again, we're at the tail end of our involvement in family care. Will we be the last region?
We are going to be the last consortium that's going to go.
In the state.
but not the last counties to go.
Right.
There's some individual counties that are not signed up to any of
Yes.
that. But
Yes, there are. So most of the issues that were there when they first started family care a long time ago have been worked through, and the customers seem to be very, very, very happy with it. The customer satisfaction level with family care is very high.
The waiting lines,
The waiting lines are supposed to disappear. But you know what? It's kind of like that formula thing I was telling you about. That's right. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. We've got a very good consortium. We've got very good partners. We have a very good director. And because we're coming in at the end, the fear factor is much lower.
Who do they answer to?
Who do they answer to? Well, they answer to many masters. They have a board of directors.
correct.
They answer to the state, and through the state, they answer to the feds. So,
Are they an audited firm?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
every, you know,
but it's supposed to save money also.
well,
Correct, and it,
but to answer your question, yes. Yeah, and it's audited as a region, and the state is audited by the feds. I mean, if you want to read the Government Accounting Office reports that come out every day, this is a heavily audited business. But I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it, when you have billions of dollars out there floating around, there's going to be hanky-panky. However, if the government is diligent and will spend money for diligence, they will keep a tighter hand on what's going on. If you have an Internal Revenue Service or a Medicare audit division or a Medicaid audit division and you don't fund it sufficiently, or a banking audit division, if you don't fund it sufficiently to make sure that everybody's playing by the rules, well, then people aren't going to play by the rules. And my wife is the chairman, president of the Kenosha Visiting Nurse Association, and has been, she's in her 37th year. She doesn't look that old either. Hi, Deb. But they are audited both regularly and spot audited. Auditors will come in from both the state and the feds frequently. That's what you need. I mean, I know that this is a Judeo-Christian nation where we say that we believe certain things, but quite frankly, if nobody's watching, a lot of bad stuff can go on, and that's just the way life is. So I expect that over the course of our lifetimes, we will find out that people have been screwing around in family care too. But by and large, the MCOs are privately owned. Okay, these are privately held corporations. And I'm not saying that that's always a guarantee that they'll be scrupulously honest, but the odds are that they want to make money. And so far, one of the things that family care has a hard time doing is getting managed care organizations, MCOs, to come into this to begin with, because the margins are really slim. It's not like the hospital business. This is a slim margin business, and they have to provide high standards of quality, and they have to pass all kinds of reviews, and that eats into their margins. The hope is that by having a large pool, like any insurance business, that they'll do well. And we have to get off, the reason we're going to this is because historically, Wisconsin was a nursing home-oriented state when it came to taking care of the needs of the elderly and disabled. We liked institutions. Institutions are far and away the most expensive way to take care of people. If you can take care of people in less intensive settings, either in the home or CBRFs or assisted living facilities, you can do well or better for people and do it not for less money, but you can control the growth of your costs. But the thing that has surprised some policymakers, as Mark knows, because Mark's been in the family care background for a long time.
about 7 years.
Yeah, and I was there when Joe Leon was there, and that was in 1992, I think. The thing that surprised them is the thing that has, for some reason, surprised a lot of people in both the federal and state government. Everybody got old. Okay, there's this big group of old people. Well, where'd they come from? Well, if I was born in 1949, I don't know where the hell they came from. I went to grade school with all of them, you know. And now they're getting old, and they're going to go into the system, and it's going to control costs, but it isn't going to be less. You know, Medicare and Medicaid, and these things are going to cost a lot of money because there's going to be a lot of people there. But then 30, 40 years from now, when we're all playing harps someplace, or shoveling coal, as the case may be, that cost will shrink because there won't be that kind of demand. So it's going to be an expensive proposition, but the state went to family care because it will enable them to provide services and keep a better handle on costs.
Will there be advocates for
Mhm.
patients to
Yes.
help them through this?
There's an ombudsman system.
Well,
And
and
is that a funded position? Or
Yeah, I think at the
will
re-
there
at the
be
region
like
it is, isn't it?
one per county or one per region?
I don't know.
Or
Ask him.
you gotta really, there's a whole lot of this, and each MCO is a little different. They're all running a little different. Go to the family care websites, because there's a lot of, you can spend a month reading. And ours is Northeastern Wisconsin Family Care, you Google that. But there is an ombudsman system in place in the state right now. It's been around for, God, what, 20, 30 years?
Yes.
And so,
is that the same one that does the nursing homes?
yeah,
Yep.
but in the same time, the state, and maybe it's a Fed requirement, I can't tell you for sure on that, but there is a requirement that requires advocate and what they call stakeholder committees to be involved in this whole process. So, as a board of directors for a family care organization, they are gonna get input from these stakeholder groups and these advocate groups. And on the board itself, at least the NEW board, and I think most of the boards have pretty much gone this route, you have one member from each county involved, appointed by the county, and then an advocate from of the three areas, which is the frail elderly, disabled, and developmentally disabled. So currently, the board for Northeastern Wisconsin is 10 individuals. And then, once they get up and running, they usually will get a couple at-large members that have expertise in managed care on the board.
You might mention how, Wisconsin's forward on this.
Oh, yeah, way.
Other states are trying to copy this.
Yes, this is a system that, and the feds have been pushing for it because it is ahead of the curve on most of the rest of the country, and it's working.
The reason the feds are liking this is because Medicaid's a 60-40 split.
Right.
It's federally funded 60% and 40% state funded. And these are big numbers, okay? And that's the same split that it is across the country. So the Wisconsin model is something that they're eager to see move forward, because regardless of what state you're in, your demographic mix is pretty much the same. And you got to get a handle on this. You just can't. Nursing homes are just not the answer. They're frightfully expensive compared to the family care model. And going forward with those big numbers, you really don't have a choice. I mean, you can't have people on waiting lists. I mean, we've got a waiting list of over, what is it?
Oh, it's down, it's quite I think it was 60 now, Kathy?
Yeah.
Something like that.
But
Yeah.
there are counties with waiting lists of hundreds that
Hundreds.
weren't on family care. I mean, before Kenosha County went to family care, there were hundreds of people on a waiting list for services. And not for a nursing home bed, for services. So, because the money wasn't following the patient. And this is their attempt to get that done, and they got the Fed waivers to do it. So we hope it works out. And your question about advocacy, regardless of whether, and what Mark said is all certainly 100% accurate, but no one has to wait for an advocate. If you're from Door County and something's not happening right, there are still people here who will be responsive. The ADRC is going to be located in Door County. There are people here who will advocate for you or make sure that if something is not being taken care of, it does get taken care of, regardless of the formalities.
Paid employees of-
Yes. Yeah. So, You'll be next,
I've heard
Cheryl.
some talk of reducing the number of counties, basically making larger counties in order to reduce state expenses. And I just wonder what your take would be on such an idea.
Not likely.
No.
No, from a logistical standpoint, to cut down the number of counties, like say Door County and Kewaunee County merged. Well, either I or the Kewaunee County Administrator, one of us is going to not be working, whoever gets the best deal, because Ed Dorner and I are about the same age, and whoever sweet talks the next one, fine. But you only reduce your overhead a little bit, because you still have highway miles to take care of and parks to take care of. And if you have two counties that are adequately staffed, not overstaffed, but adequately staffed, well, there's just not a lot of savings. That's from a logistical standpoint. From a parochial standpoint, oh, that'll happen. I mean, people are going to want to give up their county. Is anybody here a town government person? Okay. Only, I think we're down to like 12 states in the United States that still have town government, all right? In all of the other states, you have incorporated municipalities and counties. The counties handle all of the unincorporated area. The incorporated cities and villages take care of their stuff. Now, how many towns do we have? What, 14?
Well, you had to ask that question.
All right, never mind. We got a lot of towns.
About 15.
Yeah, 14, 15, whatever. I'm sorry, Leo. But we would kid when we were in Madison, like, why are there towns? Well, according to the state constitution, towns exist as holding areas of a certain geographic size for incorporated municipalities to annex land when they feel it's necessary. And those little town governments are there to make sure that the little town roads get taken care of and do whatever towns do. Now, my friend Rick Stadelman is the head of the Wisconsin Towns Association, and he's very powerful, and you want to get, but I mean, do you really need towns? Now, I say that facetiously, ladies and gentlemen, here and on our television audience, but because nobody's going to want to give up their town government. I mean, we like it, and it's a model that exists and has existed in England, and it's existed here in places for a long time. We have a lot of school districts.
Well, the best government's closest to you.
That's right, and God help you if you propose taking a school district away or merging them. And that's the parochial side. Then there's the economic side. Let's say hypothetically that you could wave a magic wand and you could get the Sturgeon Bay School District to join with Southern Door, or the Sturgeon Bay School District to join with Sevastopol. Everybody likes to talk about that in theory, but all three of those places have very different property tax bases. And the property taxpayers who in one place will do well are going to get it stuck in their keisters in another place. That tends to make for unhappy people at the end of the day, okay? So a lot of times, it may look like you've got, and politicians of all stripes say there are way too many levels of government. Well, try to get rid of one, all right? And the road to hell is paved with bright ideas. I know I speak from personal experience. So, Cheryl?
Can you tell me what percentage of the social services budget is funded by county tax levy and what is funded by state? Federal grants?
Oh, let's see. You guys were a special revenue fund last year, and let's see. The social services budget last year was, or for this year, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 5.6 million, and the revenues were 3.8, which means that's non-tax levy. Tax levy was 1.8.
Right. It's usually slightly
So-
over half, slightly over half state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right from the budget book. I think that's where it ended. I'm pretty sure.
So combining all these together, you know, this, into this human resource, what percentage
Human
of
services.
your- Human services, excuse me. What percent of the budget will that be? Of the total county budget, what percent will that be?
I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. Community programs, total expenditures was 9.
Right.
9 and almost 6, let's say 15,
Right.
$15 million in expenditures out of 70. So you do the math.
And
It's
when
one of
you-
our largest individual departments.
It
It
will
will
be
be, right,
the largest
right.
individual
As
department.
now, and
Yeah.
then combined.
And then with the family care coming.
Then family care will come in, and the levy portion will remain the same, because for how many years do we have to maintain a levy support?
It's a drop for 5 and then goes down to a certain.
Yeah.
To 22%.
We'll always be putting levy in it, and we have to be, and it'll go to the region, okay?
Right.
But the history of funding for family care is that when Tommy Thompson was governor, Joe Leon was the secretary of the Department of Human Services, and it was their idea, and a good one, to move to this model. And it's taken, that's from, I think it's like from 1992 or 94. Cheryl, do you remember when it started? Forever. It seems like, yeah, it seems like
Ever
forever.
since I got on county board, they've been talking about it, so.
So is
And-
family care going to be a separate entity from the human services?
Correct. It's gonna be a.
It'll be its own corporation.
It's out of county.
Right.
County will no longer be running those 3 services.
So therefore, some of the things that are performed by the new human services will will move elsewhere.
Correct.
So we're not duplicating.
Oh, absolutely.
family expenses.
Right.
Correct.
Going up, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
But then you'll also, it'll be created into a regional. So then you'll be
Correct.
competing with other, basically, people here will be competing with
And then you're sharing
people
expenses.
from other
more.
counties at the same, well, because of the region. you
No,
know,
they'll be
the-
providing service to our county residents through the region, our regional family care. Okay, it's
What-
ours.
Define the region.
What is it?
It's Marinette, O'Connell, Shawano, Kiwanee, Dorr, and Brown, right?
I think so,
Did I
yeah.
hit all 7
Yep.
of them? Yeah.
That's the region.
Okay.
So what we're each providing as individual counties right now will be provided by this MCO.
Right.
But we won't be competing with each other. They'll be employing people who are providing the services in all of the various geographic locations.
And I guess the best way to say it is that it's not gonna matter what county you're in. You're in the family care district. Whether you live in Marinette, you live in Kiwanee, you live in Egg Harbor, you're a consumer or a member of that family care district. So you're entitled to the same benefit anywhere in those 7 counties.
Okay, will they change from region to region?
They're all run individually. Every MCO runs a region.
It depends what region you would live in.
Right, so if you.
If you move from
If
here,
I go into another region, I
Right.
may get a different service than what I would get on.
You're
you would
probably
get a
gonna-
different provider.
Different provider, but pretty much the same service, and that's being based on how this is done, is that they're trying to make it as uniform as possible, but without taking regional identity away. That's why it's done by region, because some of the things that are happening, let's say in Grant County in the southwest corner of the state, may be a little different. What they need there might be slightly different than what they need in Egg Harbor. So each MCO gives the services needed to that individual, and each individual is screened and rated and given the services they need.
Well, then, is the money, then the counties that are in this region, they will each be basically throwing money in the pot
Correct.
with the objective of, in a sense, of spreading the costs out, like pooling with insurance, that your rates might go down, blah, blah.
You got it.
thing. But also having the other, I'm just talking this out, see if I understand this. So then, but the other object is that then the person who might be attending in using those services, there'd be a lot more continuity also.
Correct.
Okay, so it's a win-win.
Well, it's a,
If it works.
it's
But
a
I mean,
win for the
you obviously-
consumer.
It's been working.
Yeah, it's a win for the consumer, and it's a win for the counties. The counties are eager to do this, not because they're selfish, but because the way the funding stream works, we will be putting in our required amount, and it declines until it hits a base, and then that's the base you pay forever as the MCO moves
Okay,
forward.
that's what you meant by 5 years.
Right.
Right,
It's a
5
5-year drop down, 5 or 6 year drop down, I can't remember which.
It was
So-
5 the last, but, you know.
And, you know,
In these times, you gotta think outside the box.
yeah.
well, and they were thinking outside the box a long time ago on this, so it's just taken us a long time to get here. But
I
we're,
think Cheryl or, no, okay.
When you're talking about screening and what have you, so part of this organization would be lodged here so that you screen, or would people have to travel to another
Actually, the
area?
ADRC does the screening.
right
Well,
here.
the ADRs, I know they're gonna be here.
They're gonna be here. Every county has
I was trying to figure
one.
out how, if it was basically, let's say, physically one office, and it was, I don't know, Brown County, whatever. it would be.
No, the
Yeah.
ADRC will be in this building,
Okay,
right,
and they're the ones that will do the screening and funnel the information?
right.
Okay.
And then the providers come to you.
What's ADRC?
Aging and Disability Resource Center, which we will have up and going in January of 2013,
January 2nd.
right, in this building. I hope.
In the long term, does this hypothetically pose a threat to county government?
No.
No.
No, sure it doesn't.
Why?
Because you regionalized an important service. You regionalize this one for important service. Why would it not make sense to regionalize other important services, like
Well,
jails, for
this is not the first one. It'll be our first joining, well, no, it'll be our second.
Right.
We've already done regionalization for income maintenance. We now have an income maintenance consortium where those, which are part of the Social Services Department, where people who require food stamps or food shares are now part of a consortium. They split the responsibility from county to county, and Cheryl's laughing because it's a pain in the neck. But, well, good, I'm
It's
glad.
Actually,
It will be good.
and we're actually doing some of the best, in the best consortiums in the state right
Right.
now, as far as.
But some function should be regionalized. Whether it's a threat to county government, I don't see it like that. I see it as more cost effective. And they,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the reason for doing it.
the reason for doing it was not so much that it's cost effective. It's more cost effective, not that the regionalization's not cost effective on its own. It's the whole concept of family care. Family care could have done it statewide. You know, they didn't have to do it regionally. Family care could have been done on a statewide model. The counties insisted back in the 1990s, when Joe Leanne and Tommy Thompson proposed this, they didn't want us in here. They wanted to turn this over to the private sector, lock, stock, and barrel. And the people in the human services divisions and the social services divisions made a humongous stink and said, no, this has to remain under the control of counties in some way, shape, or form. And so you've got an amalgam now. The compromise was doing it on a regional basis, forming family care districts and keeping the county involvement in there. But back in the 1990s, this was going to whoever. And people were afraid. I mean, if you think people are afraid now of losing local control, you know, the social services people had many, many, many allies at that time to say, I don't think so. Because they wanted to do it on a statewide basis and take our money. And we
Yeah.
thought, well, if you want to take my money, you got to give me a kiss, all right? And there was a price to be paid. Did that, you're not, still not convinced, are you? You're a skeptic over there.
No, I personally believe that things should be done on a larger scale, so I see this as a good thing. And I do see it as potentially the thin edge of a wedge that, over time, could erode the functions provided by this quadrillion local governments. and do them more efficiently and frankly, more honestly.
Well, I don't know about the honestly part,
Well,
but when you're left
there's
with,
a lot of things like zoning issues, and there are a whole host of little issues where local cronyism is a serious component in what gets done. And regionalization of that will mean that you have regional cronyism. I realize.
thank you.
I came from Montgomery County, and there was a huge scandal, Montgomery County, Maryland. There was a huge scandal over development where they put all kinds of restrictions in the building permits and built something else. And so it can happen, I realize, but I think that to get the decision-making away from really local interests is probably a good thing.
I grew up just across the Illinois border from, you may have heard of Chicago. But, and I'm just not familiar with that, trying to do business in like Chicago is, if you'd rather do business there than, rather than Door County, I just don't know what to tell you. But, graft, greed, and corruption or cronyism exists everywhere, but I don't think anybody ever said that the Daily senior and junior were not like into cronyism, but I don't know.
I certainly would not.
No, I don't know. But the nice thing about Door County, and I really must say that, I've been coming here for over 30 years. I've been living here full-time for 8 years, and I know an awful lot of people here, and I know that if you're not honest about the way you conduct yourself in this county, you're done, and you're done in a heartbeat. Because the only thing you have to trade on here is your honesty and your integrity, and if you cheat someone, or you screw someone over, you're done. And if you want to live here and make a living here, you can't do it very well if you're a shyster. That's not to say that some don't try, but by and large, this is a place where honesty and integrity, not necessarily cheeriness all the time, but honesty and integrity is a valued commodity. It really is. Because there's just nowhere to hide, especially in the winter when all of the Illinois people leave. You can pass gas in Gills Rock and they know it in Brussels in a half an hour. So you just.
My experience is by the time you heard what you did, it's a lot worse than what you did.
Yeah. You wore a pink dress to work instead of a pink shirt, so.
Along with this issue, do you think that there are any other areas that would be suitable for privatization in our county?
In the county?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the road builders certainly believe that highway construction could be privatized, and suitable is a subjective word, okay? Now, as far as what county government does, there's probably some land issues that could be privatized. You don't necessarily have to run some of the things that are related with our land departments through a government entity. But when it comes to law enforcement, public health, social services, I suppose you could privatize your library system. She asked me. Well, she asked me, it wasn't my idea. In the old days, in the very old days, there used to be private fire departments.
Yep.
Okay? In Chicago, New York, Baltimore, old cities, there were fire districts, and you hired a fire company. They gave you a brass plaque to put on your house, and if your house caught on fire, that was the fire company that had to come there. And if they didn't get there, you were toast. So, I mean, you could privatize that, I suppose. There are private schools, and I think there's one presidential candidate who's proposed taking all federal money out of state and local education. I suppose that means it would be replaced by some kind of private system. What else do we do? I don't think you'd want to privatize the court system.
I mean, you could privatize the airport, which we do partially.
We could privatize the airport. We could probably have a private vendor operate our parks, although we run our park system with 3 full-time employees, so I doubt that would be much of a savings. But, to go back to where the gentleman was before, so much of what we do here, and whether, at whatever these levels are, is because that's the way you want us to do it. And in a democracy, you get to pick the people who come to sit on the county board and common council and school boards and town boards and what have you, village boards. And you guys get to decide within the framework that the state gives us to latitude to work in. But quite frankly, I'm an administrator, he's a supervisor. I do what they tell me to do most of the time. Don't you start.
Right?
Yeah, at least that's what I say. But, you know, we've got a framework to work in, and those are the constraints we have. And we elect people to go to the state legislature and the federal government, and they make strictures on everybody, you know, from the top down. And that's kind of the way it is. Let me say this, philosophically, if it makes good business sense to have something operate in a more cost-effective way in the private sector, and it's legal to do it, I will always take a look at it. It's not a big issue for me. As long as we can get the work done and I can have the highest standards of quality met, then I don't have, who does it is not as important as getting it done. I think family care is an example, and we know it works. In the Kenosha Visiting Nurse Association is a private 501c3, has been for 75 years. They do great work. They could probably take over some functions that public health departments do, for instance. Sometimes the problem with privatization is, and I think this is the biggest hook that must be thoroughly examined, and everybody's got to say it's a good idea, is the loss of control, especially when you live in a place where there is not competition for that work. If you give that up, you'll never get it back, which is why a lot of municipal governments are very, very interested in holding on to their own stuff. The city of Sturgeon Bay has a utility district, but it's the cities. They could sell that. They could make that private. Well, and then what? Okay, and then if it goes to hell in a handbasket, and there are places that have done that and lived with the results, well, now what? And so you have to be very, very careful. It can't be a decision that is made in the height of emotion. It's got to be something that's well thought out. And if it's not broke, don't fix it. If you're getting good, cost-effective, and subject what you're doing to good management practices and make sure that it's being done correctly and efficiently, then why would you just do it for the heck of it? So, in most places they are.
I've got one thing quick before we lose Laddie in the TV that I stopped by our clerk of court's office to, just because you hear a lot about people saying, you know, sheriff's out there piling in the money on his quotas, writing tickets and all that. And I just thought this was kind of interesting. What starts out as a $30 forfeiture gets $25 court costs added on, $7.80 of penalty surcharge, $10 jail surcharge, $13 crime lab and drug charge, $68 of court support, $21.50 of justice info turns into $175.30, of which $40 stays in the county.
And I would just like to make one remark before we do lose him, and then I'll blab my brains off. But in 2006, when I came here as the county administrator, we had 353 employees. We haven't changed much of our programming or functions. We started January 1st of 2012 with 337 employees. Every time we have turnover, we review the jobs, the job classifications, the job descriptions, both on a represented and a non-represented side to make sure that the position needs to be replaced and how it's replaced. So we try to be careful stewards of the purse. I expect that number to continue to decline. It'll certainly decline some way, shape, or form, I think, when family care comes in. But we have to always be trying to get more juice for the squeeze because the resources that we have are under stress. So, yep.
Well, that's what I was gonna mention. If I remember the premise of the League of Women Voters in these programs, it sounds like it's either government, county as is, or privatization. And I think a missing factor is merging, running a more streamlined county government. not being critical, just in general, to run a streamline, there seem to be, in my opinion, some duplication and blah, blah, and so on. So I don't think it's a matter of just county government now versus privatization of it. There's also the possibility of streamlining it, making mergers in areas that are reasonable and logical and
Well, sure.
working together. Now, just personally, I was upset that frankly, the city police didn't go with the county sheriff or the other way around. Because not only sharing facilities, but sharing in give and take of every day, you learn about what's going on and so on and so forth in the county. But that's just my personal thing on that. But I just think that this is smart, the fact that you're going to be combining those two departments when you could glean knowledge from each other easier besides sharing, costs and streamlining.
Yeah,
So
and
I-
it's
I don't
difficult.
think it's an either or.
No.
Well, and it's also
There's
better
other
for the,
options.
for the person walking through the door. too.
Correct.
It's gonna be better service for
So
them
that's why I
also.
meant kind of by thinking outside the box in
Yeah.
a way earlier. It isn't just a matter, we can look to ourselves
Yeah.
to help.
I only know of this anecdotally because it occurred before I got here. Kathy was working for the city at that time. But, logically, if you got to just be king and say, okay, why do we have a justice center on the west side? And why did we build a city campus over here? Why is this all like the government campus in the heart of the city? Okay? Why didn't they, in many places they do. The sheriff's department and the police department are co-located in the same building. All right? Okay, well, I think if you want to go to the Advocate and read the files, you'll find out why that happened. And it's kind of like why we've got towns. People like what they've got, and the people who make the decisions are heavily vested there. There have been proposals to take the city police department, we have to have a sheriff, okay? And there have been proposals to have law enforcement provided by one law enforcement agency. One of the things that gets in the way of that is the fact that cities have police and fire commissions. I think Mark's got some kind of relationship with.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, but you did.
Yeah.
And so they hire a police chief and a fire chief based on professional qualifications. And in the old days, at least, a sheriff's election was, for better or for worse, a beauty contest. Now sheriffs usually run for office with high levels of qualification. They're all certified by the Law Enforcement Standards Board as police officers, the same way everybody else is. And they're usually highly trained professional people. Municipalities are still kind of reluctant to let go of their police and fire commissions in the hiring process and give it to an elected sheriff. Although my experience over the last 20 years I think that's a straw man. Does the city of Sturgeon Bay need its own parks department? Or could that be done with one parks department for the county? I don't know. But I know that the local people make the local decisions, and that's what people like. Somebody said the best government is the government closest to the people. And if you want to talk about regionalization, you can't get towns to give up anything, much less,
No, but I'm not talking merging city, county, I'm talking.
No,
about the
I'm talking about
merging within the
provision
county
of
government.
services.
Correct.
Yeah.
That the county provides.
Yeah, well, and we do a lot of we're actually merging committees with the idea of down the road changing the structure of our departments. But once again, you will get to a number of people that you need to do the work that you won't be able to get below before you have to start cutting service. But one of the things that a great many think tanks on both sides of the political spectrum have said is that governments have to start doing things more efficiently. The County of Door provides all the IT services for the city of Sturgeon Bay Utility, and we do some for the Sturgeon Bay School District. Now, nobody even knows that, but all of that stuff runs through our systems here. And that's good for the taxpayers. Why would you need smaller subunits of government going out and doing the same thing that the larger one does? We give them a great deal, they're happy customers, and the taxpayers in the aggregate are happy with it. But no, it's seamless, and you don't even know it. And we could do a lot of that. We could do more of it.
Fuel costs too.
Mm-hmm.
Fuel costs.
Yeah, that's true, yeah, the schools in the city buy their fuel from us.
fuel?
Yeah.
we buy fuel in bulk, and then we allow the schools to buy.
And the city
And the city
to fuel up.
to fuel up at our pumps, correct.
So we try.
Can we do that?
If I could just stop for a minute, and because I want to make one mention for the taping, is that the next two meetings for the league on the question of privatization, which is a study and just a view of what people think about it. It's not for any specific purpose. This is a nationwide study, so we're not trying to have any particular opinion. But these meetings are going to be Thursday, March 8th, from 4 to 5:30 in the basement meeting room of the library. And the second meeting is Thursday, April 12th, from 4 to 5:30 in the basement meeting room of the library.